Hi, I'm Christy McDonald, and here's what's coming up this week on One Detroit. Weeks away from the presidential election, we break down population and demographic shifts in Macomb, Wayne, and Oakland counties and how that may impact the vote. Plus, the creation of freeways in Detroit and around the country as relics of structural racism. And then the message behind the Black Lives Matter movement 7 years after it began. It is all coming up on One Detroit.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, MASCO Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. MASCO, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support for this program provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV,
the KRESGE Foundation, Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. NISSAN Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you.
Hi there and welcome to One Detroit. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining me. Well, we are rolling towards the 2020 election with the first presidential debate this week and a lot of focus on Michigan voters and specifically how demographics are shifting in Southeast Michigan. Coming up, we'll take a closer look at the changes in Macomb County from last election to this one and how that may affect the vote. Also ahead, Stephen Henderson as part of American Black Journal's three-part series called Do Black Lives Matter in America? He'll talk with the co-lead organizers of the BLM movement here in Detroit. And as the country grapples with racism and monuments to the past, we wanted to take a look at the history of freeway building, not only here in Detroit, but around the country. Freeways are considered by some to be relics of structural racism when you look at why and where they were constructed. One Detroit associate producer Will Glover has the story.
You could look at any other part of the country and you would say you can't have a strong region without a strong city. Right? I would say the racism here was so deep that they were willing to kill the city in spite of themselves.
Detroit, the crossroads of half the population of the United States, is but minutes away.
Starting in the late 1950s, construction on the I-75 and I-375 highways cut through some of Detroit's most prosperous black neighborhoods of Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, which rivaled New York's Harlem and Tulsa, Oklahoma's Black Wall Street. Thousands were displaced, erasing generations of wealth. Some call these highways Detroit's largest monument to racism. This is Detroit historian Jamon Jordan.
Historically, the building of these freeways affected the whole country. It didn't just affect Detroit. But largely, one of the major areas that they affected almost everywhere they went was African-American communities.
But could there be a way to rebuild the wealth and opportunity for the next generation of Black Detroiters? I spoke with freelance writer Nithin Vejendla, whose recent article on Detroit highways being racist appeared in the Detroit Free Press.
Start with how a freeway could possibly be a symbol of racism.
So you look at the construction of the freeways, and they were routed primarily through Black neighborhoods, because at that time, and still even now, Black communities had less power, had less political power to be able to resist these kind of really disruptive changes. And because of racist redlining policies, land and houses and homes in Black neighborhoods were worth far less than homes in white neighborhoods.
The winner of the Detroit wasn't the only city being dissected by highways. In fact, the man who set the national trend for city planning started in New York City. His name was Robert Moses.
Robert Moses, New York City construction coordinator, is a world-famous highway planner, a man who knows his business.
In a 1974 biography, it was said Moses suggested suburbs make the water in their community pools colder to keep Black people from swimming with whites. Closer to home, it was Detroit Mayor Albert Cobo who put together the plans to build the freeways that in 1956 would decimate Black Bottom and Paradise Valley.
Now, there are arguments, did he do it because he's a racist and destroyed what was left of a black community, or did he do it because it was the most feasible place to put a freeway? And so arguments go both ways, but looking at the history of Cobo, his acts, his policies, and his ideas about the African-American community, it's pretty clear that this was not a coincidence.
This is Wayne State University law professor and director of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights, Peter Hammer.
Think about structural racism and think about how structural racism is defined at the Keith Center. We're looking at the inter-institutional dynamics that produce and reproduce racially disparate outcomes over time. When the freeways were started, everybody thought this, white people particularly, thought this is development. And it was also thought of necessary for part of a national plan of interstate networks, and also for the creation and cohesion of the suburbs. Now you have to sort of imagine that that's the city of underwriting its own demise, right? So the expressways were thought, well, these are easy ways for Detroiters to go out to the suburbs and come back. There are also easy ways for Detroiters to go out to the suburbs and never come back.
Sleeves rolled up, Detroit levels and shifts and carves the contours of a new city. And a new spirit of progress matches the vision of its people.
What was I-75 before it was I-75, right? And it was Hastings Street. And Hastings Street ran up and down Paradise Valley, which was the most important and most concentrated African-American business district and living district anywhere in the city. So Tulsa has got a lot of attention lately for very legitimate reasons. And they called that the Black Wall Street, and that was destroyed by a race riot. Detroit's Black Wall Street was destroyed by quote-unquote development and the construction of the expressways and the destruction of Paradise Valley. And people who run up and down I-75 today have no clue.
Detroit is borrowing funds to build more miles of expressway, and build them today instead of years from now.
The question now, can Detroit reverse the process? That is, remove freeways. Cities like Milwaukee and San Francisco already have.
You look at San Francisco's Embarcadero Freeway was heavily damaged in an earthquake in 1970. Instead of repairing it, they simply just removed it. And when they did that, traffic didn't significantly increase. It didn't cause massive traffic jams, and it significantly improved quality of life for a lot of people.
I spoke with civic engagement expert and dean of the School of Architecture at the University of Detroit Mercy, Dan Pitera.
What is the economic impact, to the extent that you can speak on it, of undertaking such a project?
Think about what a scale of a project like this would do, and think about the numbers, the thousands of jobs that could truly be generated across the decade of time, from planning, engineering, surveying. It really is we're talking thousands upon thousands of jobs that are possible, which then means that we have to then not just plan for the jobs, but plan for the preparing and working with people to be ready for those jobs.
The Michigan Department of Transportation was to soon start the removal of I-375 in downtown Detroit, but the project was delayed because of the pandemic.
Do you think that removing the highways is an opportunity to address some of these, historically, systemically racist issues?
No, I don't think you could make any credible connection to removing highways in today and undoing the harm that was done.
The filling in of I-375 it's not harming the African-American community, but it won't bring Black Bottom back.
Many believe that undoing the damage to Black American communities in cities like Detroit means investing in Black neighborhoods at the same scale and with the same resolve white suburbs received during urban renewal.
It's just a matter of who has the power. Which means that at the end of the day, if you're not changing the belief system, right, the sort of highly racialized belief system that have created this history, then you have no chance of digging yourself out of the hole. So a lot of effort has to be of really intentionally reshaping the white mind, right, in a way that can transcend the sort of white supremacist heritage that we have received.
Regarding that stretch of freeway connecting the Chrysler Freeway to the downtown riverfront, I-375, What some can't help but see as a major symbol of racism will remain for a few more years. Maybe then the many millions of dollars needed will return to state coffers, allowing for it to be filled in and receive a proper burial.
So we're now weeks away from the presidential election, and again, we see a lot of national political interest in Michigan. This year, we wanted to take a closer look at voters in Southeast Michigan to understand what has changed in recent years, what population shifts do we see, and how will that affect the vote? Well, we're starting in Macomb County, the place all pundits want to understand. It's often called a bellwether for the country, for good reason. In the past 10 elections, Macomb County voters have chosen the winning candidate 8 times. Going back to the 80s, the counties voted twice for Ronald Reagan, then voted for Bush Sr. In 1996, voters chose Bill Clinton, then solidly chose Barack Obama twice before flipping to Donald Trump in 2016, giving him 54% of the vote. It's these voting habits that have interested political pollsters and national media alike. But before we get deeper into voting habits, who are these neighbors in Macomb County so keen on predicting presidents? And how have they changed in recent decades? For the numbers, we turn to the census data from Macomb County and Metro Detroit stats guru Kurt Metzger, demographer and director emeritus of Data Driven Detroit. We spoke to voters in Warren at our first community conversation at Dovetail Cafe in November. They had a sense of the demographic changes in their county. Let's find out just how right they are.
We've lost our youth. They've moved away.
It's true. 17% of the population in Macomb County is over 65. Millennials make up only 26% of the population. In comparison, 33% of the people in Wayne County are 20 to 39 years old.
Macomb is aging. Mainly what we're seeing is because of births going down. A lot of young people leaving Macomb for other areas.
What about diversity?
I think when you look at Macomb County, what a lot of people don't realize is that it really kind of is a piece of America because of the diversity that we have from 8 Mile all the way up to the top of Macomb.
Very true. Since 2010, more than 31,000 African Americans have moved into the southern end of the county.
What we've seen is a lot of movement from Detroit into southern Macomb particularly because of the schools. When the economy tanked in the 2007, 2008, we had foreclosures, so you had a lot of openings, and African Americans with less resources who couldn't afford to go to Oakland County found Roseville, Warren, East Point particularly.
And immigrants from all over the world have settled in Macomb County.
So Macomb County tends to get more recent immigrants. They haven't established themselves, so they're lower income in many cases.
Metzger says the county has a large Chaldean population, and they are Catholics from northern Iraq, in cities like Sterling Heights, Macomb Township, and Shelby Township. Both Syrian and Iraqi immigrants call Warren home.
Macomb has the largest Albanian population of any county in the country and continues to get Albanians.
Other immigrant populations, Metzger points out, include Ukrainians, Bangladeshi, and Hmong. Much of the Hmong populations come from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand.
Macomb has really gotten on the bandwagon to be one of the first welcoming counties in the state, very much realizing that the diversity is a strength that they have.
What happens as you head north in Macomb County?
There is a divide, or perceived divide, within the county. That in the north end you've got some pockets that are the wealthiest parts of Macomb County, up around Shelby and Romeo. And down here you have some of the poorest pockets of Macomb County.
There is a trend of young families with more wealth choosing to live north of M59.
What we've seen is M59, that northern from Shelby, Macomb, now moving even farther into Ray Township, up near Armada, Romeo, those areas. A lot of Oakland County transplants, primarily white homeowners moving into those areas, tended to be larger families, looking for the larger homes and those opportunities and good school districts.
Despite the movement into and out of Macomb County, it is still the third most populated county in the state and has seen higher than average voter turnout in recent years. In the 2016 presidential election, Macomb County had a 67% voter turnout. Statewide, voter turnout was 63%. For the 2018 midterm election, Macomb has a 59% turnout, higher than the 55% turnout statewide. Stan Greenberg is a Democratic pollster well known for studying Macomb County voters and working on Bill Clinton's election campaign.
I first went to Macomb County when I became a pollster. I left academia to try to figure out how the Reagan Democrats abandoned Democrats and what Democrats could do to get them back.
And despite all the demographic changes in Macomb, there's one voting bloc that piques interest as he continues to talk to Macomb County voters.
You know, though Macomb itself, has changed and become itself a little bit more diverse, but it's still a place where white working class voters are predominant.
He believes it's these white working class voters that flipped Macomb County in 2016 and gave Trump the election.
We have an election where Hillary Clinton ignores Michigan, doesn't respect working people, doesn't run on the kind of issues that matter to these voters. And when they're not respected, they turn away, and Trump was talking about trade, throwing out NAFTA and these trade agreements and working for them, and produced a margin in Macomb that was big enough to give him a win in Michigan. If not for Macomb, Trump would not have won Michigan and maybe would not have won the presidency.
But he's not so sure Macomb voters will swing the same way in 2020.
I'm not one of those people who think the Trump voters, the swing Trump voters, are still with him. I think 2018, the blue wave, was a realigning election, played out in the biggest possible way in Michigan. This strong economy does not produce jobs, does not produce wages increases for them, and so they don't see any wage increases. So I think they see a president who governs for the rich, not for working people. It's a hard road back, I think, for Trump to regain Michigan.
And coming up next week, a closer look at Oakland County. For all of our election 2020 coverage, just head to our website at onedetroitpbs.org. All right, turning now to the Black Lives Matter movement, which was created in 2013 after George Zimmerman was acquitted in the murder of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. Since then, it's grown into a global cry to stop police brutality, violence, and racial injustices against people of color. We've seen protests take place in Detroit and across the country to shine a light on these issues and what it really means to value Black life. American Black Journal's Stephen Henderson talked with the co-lead organizers of the Black Lives Matter Detroit chapter, John Sloan III and Curtis Renee, about the movement's message.
What is the current state of things with Black Lives Matter? John, I'll start with you.
This recent moment has been very interesting. We've seen a massive uptick in our traffic on our website, going from a couple emails a week to hundreds of emails a day. And in one sense, we really appreciate that new energy. On the other sense, it's slightly frustrating because we haven't gone anywhere, right? We've been here, we've been doing work. And I think what a lot of people don't realize about Black Lives Matter in specific is that we are an organization with affiliate chapters, and we run programs, and we have to do the same type of fundraising as any other group. The primary difference is that our individual chapters have a lot of autonomy as to what we choose to focus on. And that's based upon the idea that what we need in Detroit is completely different from what you might need in Louisville or in San Diego. And so I think this recent movement has been obviously of benefit in some senses because it's kind of refocused the attention on the movement for Black lives. And it's our job now to make sure that we can leverage that and continue that momentum, because this moment for us doesn't fade away. We continue to do the work long after the cameras have stopped rolling.
Yeah. Curtis, can you talk about Detroit and the momentum we've seen here, the specific protests and the response from police, and what you see as either the opportunity or maybe the frustration of where we are at this point?
So I just wanted to lift up that the 100-day mark for the marches did happen a few weeks ago, which I feel is something wonderful. And also saying that our protesters here in Detroit have been completely nonviolent during those 100 days. And in the moments of them being nonviolent, they were met with brutality and also a spin on the narrative from Chief Craig, spinning that the protesters are actually like outside agitators and that they were also being violent, which is completely untrue. So I'm really interested and really excited to see how the protests grow from just not just in being protests, but organizing and becoming a movement and going forward.
So I want to spend some time talking about defund the police, which is a slogan that I think confuses some people. There's other people who've taken it and misinterpreted it intentionally to cast aspersions on the movement. And then I think there are people who are genuinely curious about, well, what does that mean and what would that look like? Curtis, I'll start with you. Talk about what you mean when you say defund the police.
Police have been a part of how safety has been framed in our community spaces. And so it can be really scary for folks to think about, like, well, if we're talking about taking police out of our communities, then who is going to provide safety? Because that is what those things have meant in our communities for so long. So one thing is defunding the police also means how are we able to reclaim the power over what safety means in our community and being able to provide actual safety on our streets and in our neighborhoods. And also lifting up something that John said earlier around reallocating funds. Police are called for to address mental illness within our communities. They're called to address domestic violence. They're called to address so many things that they do not have the training to actually support in those moments. And instead of those dollars and that money going into spaces that actually have the skill sets to support our communities in that way, those funds are taken away from them and pumped into the police system. And so when we say we want to defund them, we want to make sure that money is going into services and support systems that can actually create a safety net for our communities and addressing and supporting what's actually happening instead of further criminalizing people and surveilling people.
John, when we talk about defunding the police, for you, what does that mean?
I think it's important to think about our system and the way it was constructed in its full context. And I think oftentimes we tend to look at these issues in a vacuum and not at the intersection with which all these systems connect, right? If you go to buy a house and you have the home inspector come and look at the house and they say, oh, this house is great, except for you have 3 massive cracks in your foundation, you're not buying that house. It doesn't matter how many coats of paint you put on it, or if you put a new roof in, or you put in some new hardwood floors, that foundation is still cracked. And at the foundation of the system of policing, we're built in certain implicit biases, the criminalization of Black bodies. We all know the history of Southern policing as it grew out of slave patrols and how those policing models merged during the Great Migration, which liberally you're going to put between 1910 to 1970. And 1970 was yesterday when you think about the historical context of how society progresses. So when we talk about defunding the police, we're talking about upending, yes, that system that Curtis spoke to that is inherently and implicitly biased, but more intentionally, I think we're talking about remaking a system that is more equitable for everyone that it needs to touch and for everyone that it needs to serve.
And make sure you go to onedetroitpbs.org for American Black Journal's 3-part series called Do Black Lives Matter in America? It's produced in partnership with Bridge Detroit. All right, well, we're going to end the show with a performance that really speaks to feelings of racial injustice in the country. It is an original 4-part piece called Justice that premiered at the Detroit Jazz Festival in September. What you're about to see is from the second movement, written by Chris Collins. It's called Fear in the Fearless, and it's described as how we choose to face fear. We can run or find strength and courage to confront fear head on. Enjoy this moving performance, and I'll see you next time. Take care. You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, MASCO Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. MASCO, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support for this program provided by the Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV,
the KRESGE Foundation, Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. NISSAN Foundation, Ally, and viewers like you.